Hello and welcome back to PH Chuck Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Alex Borg, the more handsome looking bald man on the show today.
I doubt that.
How
Thanks,
are we?
man. Thanks. I'm good, man. All is well over here. Appreciate it. How are you doing?
I'm good. Again, we've pretty much filmed the podcast offline, but for everyone that's just joined in, if you give us a little introduction on how you got to strength and conditioning and this whole industry.
Sure. I want to call it a bumpy road to get here. You told me a little bit about yourself, and I kind of have to pick up at the same age range, essentially. When I was 15, I started playing football. And at the time, we didn't have any strength coaches or anything like that. So I used to just always try to find out what do the best people do and try to emulate that. And so I was kind of writing my own programs early on, try to see what's on the internet, see what the pros do, and just kind of go off of that. And then over time, I went to the US for high school, had some form of structured strength and conditioning there. But when I came back to Germany, I realized, okay, there's this solid talent here in American football. Is what I started playing in Germany. And I continued that whole approach of, writing my own programs, but I started refining it a little bit more for myself. But again, just for myself. And then I eventually was fortunate enough to earn a scholarship to play college football at Wyoming, where I had my first real strength and conditioning coaches, like dedicated strength and conditioning coaches to us as a team. And that was inspiring in and of itself that, you had somebody that was just there for your performance development, essentially. And I was like, if I can have that, I can go anywhere. So that was pretty great. And these guys were special. I'm talking about Trent Greener here. That was my first strength coach. And then Zach Duval, that was my second strength coach in my last year. But both of them, had their own approaches, their own philosophies. And I always just kept an open eye because I always was fascinated by training and loved the iron game, loved being in the weight room. But towards the end of my football career, so I played my 4 years at Wyoming, I started changing my focus. I wanted to join the military. I want to say I fell out of love with the game of football at the time, and I wanted to join the military. And there too, on that journey, I applied that same idea that I had before, just writing my own programs. What do you have to be? What do you have to do to be an operator, right? So I started writing my own programs, try to get info from people that have worked at that level, and started, continued refining my programs for that type of work or tasks or what have you. And then, that was probably a 2.5 year, 3 year journey that didn't lead to what I wanted to, because I wanted to join the U.S. military and in the special operations realm. But because I was German and didn't have a green card, I couldn't stay in the U.S. and all the attempts to stick around failed. So I moved back to Germany, and 3 months after my return, I actually joined the German military and joined their special operations pipeline. But without spending too much time on that, I eventually decided that this particular course in the German military, or, this direction that I took, was not for me, and decided to change paths. Got off that, and I had just had this this time in my life where I hit sort of this identity crisis, because I was an athlete. I always identified myself with being an athlete. People around me, people that I knew and didn't know me, referred to me as Alex the football player, and then I was not that anymore. And then I wanted to be, I thought what was my calling, I was going to be a soldier. And that too eventually fell through, and I was like, what am I supposed to do here? What's the meaning in all of this? So I dove into reading a bunch of stuff and turned inward and tried to find out what made sense. What has always made sense to me, and what have I always enjoyed looking back several years. And I came back to strength and conditioning, training, moving weights, getting strong, that, very meathead thought to have, but that's always what gave me a lot of solace and peace, if you will. And so I turned to that, and I was like, okay, I'm all right at this. I like to train, but I had no formal education at the time in that. Only my experience as an athlete and writing my own programs since I was 15 years old probably. But, at that time I was like, okay, what do I need to do? And my buddies owned CrossFit gyms in the region that I lived in, and they actually gave me the first opportunity to coach a group of people. And so I'm like, sure, I'll try this, and that really opened my eyes to a whole different side of myself, where I almost didn't recognize who I was, because when I started coaching, for a lack of a better word, I blossomed. Like I actually saw a very, very good side of myself, teaching, educating, why we do what we do, and so on and so forth. And I was dealing with Gen Pop at the time, right? The CrossFit community. And that really, really opened my eyes. As like, I really enjoy this, and I really enjoy who I am, because I didn't enjoy who I was just leading up to this. So how can I get more of this? And how can I be better at this? How can I establish myself in this field? But I was in Germany, right? Strength and conditioning is just now on the rise with, the NSCA Germany having been established and all that. And I mean, Germany obviously, as we know, has a great history in sports science. If you think back to the East German sports science experiments and all that, which kind of have been covered up well, at the same time, it's like the whole strength and conditioning, athletic development is just kind of on its own little shadow path. It's happening, but it's not developed like it is in the US, for instance. And I've been so Americanized over my time in the US that I was yearning for that American influence, that I wanted to be in strength and conditioning. I wanted to be a strength coach. So I'm like, okay, what do I need to do? I can't get a German education because they're not there. So I looked for an English-speaking education, and that led me to the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. And that was COVID, right? During COVID time, I was like, all right, let me get into this master's program. So to get into the master's program, it was like, what do I need to do? Because I had a business education from Wyoming, no exercise science degree, anything like that, although I had knowledge in it. So I got my CSCS at the time. I was like, I studied for that, got that, and put that into my application. And I luckily had a good network of former strength coaches that were happy to write references for me. And that eventually led to me being allowed into the program, although I didn't have any exercise science background. So maybe some luck involved, maybe some fate, I don't know. But I got accepted into the program, this is strength and conditioning in Edinburgh, which I found out a few years later was built by Dr. Stone, who has now chaired my doctoral dissertation here. And anyway, going through that 1.5 year degree at Edinburgh, I struggled my way through, if you will, because the academic side of things was never really something that I had in mind. I never thought I'd get a master's degree in the first place, but if that meant I could become a coach in strength and conditioning, that's what I needed to do. So very simple thinking at the time, not a lot of academic background besides my bachelor's degree. But yeah, I pursued that, and eventually, when I received my graduation certificate, on that graduation day, I met a gentleman named Dave Collins. He's a performance psychologist out of Scotland as well. Well, Irish.
He's at Edinburgh as well.
Yeah, he's a professor at Edinburgh, and we got to talking, and he noticed my American accent, and we got to talking about my experience in the U.S. and his experience in the U.S. and football, and eventually, we ended up having a couple of phone calls about future direction, because I couldn't figure out a future in Germany for myself in strength and conditioning, simply because
something
the field
we
was
spoke
not
about as well.
Exactly, because the field was not established at the time. So he said, hey, I know Meg and Doc Stone over at East Tennessee State in the U.S. Maybe I can introduce you to them. So he did. I visited Meg and Doc for a week when they had their annual coaches college, which is also coming up here in a few weeks, early November. And I went to visit back in 22 to find out about their program, their PhD program in sport physiology and performance. So I'm like, all right, let's take this trip. I was happy to get back to the U.S. Planes, trains, automobiles were open up again to travel. Like I could leave Germany again after COVID and socialize again, essentially. And I got to talking with the faculty, all the students there, learn about the program and the uniqueness of the program. And the last thing that Meg and Doc said to me is like, we look forward to your application. So I went dark, got off social media, put my application together, took the GRE, which is like an entry exam here, and I got accepted eventually, right? And at the time, I was working with the German Sevens rugby national team, and we were in a training camp in South Africa when I got the application, the acceptance letter. Yeah. And so I'm like, wow, this is amazing, right? So 5-6 months later, I was packing my bags to move to the US, back to the US, like right where I wanted to be. So that led to me coming back here, and this is where I'm at now. I'm in Johnson City, Tennessee. I'm finishing up my doctoral studies in sport physiology and performance. I defended my dissertation recently, and I've been working mostly with soccer teams here at the university. Men's soccer first, now women's soccer, which has been just such a great experience working with my first female team. And yeah, been a weight room supervisor here, just based on my previous experience in management, in coaching. And so I've been fortunate to really kind of be in the mix there, be in the weight room, try to establish some standards, raise the boats a little bit, raise the tide to raise the boats a little bit. And yeah, I've just been kind of taking, how do I say this? I used to have the mindset of, I'm gonna have it my way. This is the way. That was the whole time when I was trying to join the military, like super rigid. I was trying to say this is the way, and eventually, I stopped fighting, if you will, and just kind of let the universe guide me a little bit. It's like, hey, there's a door opening up. Just like go towards that door, and then here's someone introducing you to that person. All right, I'm gonna go follow this, and that eventually led me to where I am today. So yeah, for one, I can pursue my professional development at pretty much with a terminal degree at a high level. And I also get to build a personal life that I've been. So it's a great combination being here. I still love training, still love coaching, and being here with you now. It's like, wow, what an opportunity to get to talk to another coach and just talk shop, if you will. Mm-hmm. So that's the long story of my journey, conditioning and coaching.
So the good thing about this being my podcast is we can do whatever we want. There's not a time limit between things. But one thing that, again, we met in Germany at the ICST conference, and I think something that was similar in both of us, we started early, we went to the US, we then came back to Europe, and obviously it's not a culture shock, because you can get used to a culture of a country, culture of people being, but the performance isn't there, and not that the standards aren't there, but the environments aren't there for the same processes. So again, you kind of touched it, but when you went back to Germany, there was this whole crisis of fuck, who am I, what is sport, can I replicate this, what do we do, there's no systems in place for it. And again, you've just kind of mentioned it as well, but one thing that I always like to ask people is what currently gets you fired up in this industry? And we were kind of speaking about this, and again, I'll let you take that away, but it's something that is genuinely not a lot of people realize the differences in sporting depending on which country you are. But then having people like yourself to come on the podcast, Doc and Meg Stone come on the podcast and show their full experience and what they're about, it's unique. But yeah, so if you take away what gets you fired up in this industry. This is a quick shout out to our main sponsor on this channel, TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is all-in-one platform that hosts programs, questionnaires, testing, anything that you may need for your athlete's performance, you can host it in TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr also now has 2 different sides, which is OS and Practice. For more information on TeamBuildr, check out the link in the description. And if you use code PACHOCKUP all together, you will get a 30-day free trial.
Well, it gets me fired up. And we talked about this before, but I was thinking about this leading up to, in the days leading up to this, because I couldn't pinpoint anything. I could pinpoint many things, but not one thing that would necessarily fire me up. But talking about this whole topic of of training, meeting coaches, networking. I could speak for hours upon hours just about training, just because I love it, and our journeys. And before we even got started, we were talking about Washington and time at Wyoming and all that. And I think that is, if I could do that all day, that'd be awesome, right? It's kind of hard to make a living just off of that. I think the fact that you've created this platform is very unique, very special, especially for coaches, even with different mindsets and all that kind of stuff, or philosophies, which I'm sure we'll get into too. But the other side of what gets me fired up, this is more like the positive side, right? Like, I am talking about training, and that obviously entails talking with like-minded people, talking with people that have had similar experiences. But I've heard this thing before where you should pursue something that fires you up in the negative sense, right? Things that frustrate you in your field is almost something that should give you a certain direction of maybe you want to go down that rabbit hole so you can create a change, right? And the other side of that, what fires me up, the negative side of that, is sometimes the lack of standards, the lack of desire to be excellent, the lack of attention to detail, the lack of sense of urgency, those kinds of things. And this might make me sound like a perfectionist or something like that, but these things were kind of ingrained in me through my previous coaches, not just the strength coaches, but like my football coaches as well. And football obviously is a very highly disciplined sport ideally, but over time I just realized it's that's something that really separates organizations, teams, athletes, is that, okay, yeah, we're all strength training for the most part. We're all conditioning. We all have access to the same textbooks and the research, and maybe we have a certain lineage like we talked about earlier, a coaching tree that we kind of fall under. But what separates the truly great teams and organizations from the rest of the pack is, how do you do it? Not the methods, but with what intent do you do it? And I think that is also very much tied to the standards and the culture that you have established over time. And that was really one big thing for me here at ETS, attempting to kind of raise the bar, And sometimes when you try to do that, you shake the tree a little bit too much. Sometimes you're not in the right environment to do that, right? And trying to raise the bar clarifies or really shines light upon your environment. And it shows who you're dealing with, who's around you. Do they want to raise the bar, right? Is everybody else, on board with you raising the bar? Or is it an individual effort, right? And so that is something that fires me up in the frustration kind of sense. Is I've been seeking for the longest time for an environment where the majority of people really wants to raise the bar. I mean, people that just pursue excellence, not perfection, but excellence, right? And it's a pursuit. It's not a finished product. We're always chasing it, but having a group of people that really want to be great, right? And as I'm saying this, I get goosebumps, I get a little bit shaky, because that again tells me that's what fires me up. I want to be in an environment that wants to be great. And the interesting thing about that is, at whatever level you go into, the high school level, the college level, the pro level, even at the pro level, let's just take football for an example, you still have teams that just crap out. They're just bad. They suck, right? Well, how is that possible? They're one of 32 teams with the best players that the college landscape could put out. But why are some teams just so exceptionally good compared to others who are, over a long period of time, are exceptionally bad in that same league? And you can apply that to any sport, right? So to me, it's it's really about the culture. It's about the standards that you set. And I mentioned Nick Saban, for instance, the attention to detail that made them so great. Almost that perfectionism that made them so great, and the unwillingness to sacrifice that
standard.
That standard, exactly, or compromise any of that. That is what made them great. And, just like many, many other schools, they have the greatest weight rooms, they have the greatest equipment, they have educated strength coaches with their CSCS or their CSCCA and their master's degree and yada, yada, yada. But what is really separating those people? And we've talked about methods. Is it conjugate? Is it block? Is it, because there's similarities in those, right? Conjugate, success, assist, and block. Or, is it just a principle?
Yeah.
You can get lost in that, right? But what is it that really makes those single teams, those single organizations repeatedly good, right? And so those are the things that I'm really fired up about is culture, standards, high standards, and seeking individuals or putting myself in a position around individuals that have the same desire to be great, right?
No,
Thanks for letting me go off on a tangent.
it's all good. You don't need to apologize for that. So I think this is a great topic because I do think that people are quick to drop standards nowadays. Like it's okay like to expect something from your athletes. You should also make them aware that they should have expectations of you. Like if I'm in a weight room with a new team, I give them my expectations, but I also ask like, what's your expectations for me? And I've done this and I've spoken about it on the podcast. Like I did this with my niece and nephew. Like I've coached them before. So to them, I was like, okay, these are what I expect from you. And then you and your brother go back, list 2 or 3 things that you expect from me. Because like, if I'm asking you and demanding something from you, I also want to meet what you want from me. And it's that thing of like, if standards drops, we can identify exactly where they're coming from and how we can change it from then on. And it's like, it's not going to be perfect all the time. And I think that's when it can become like a little bit of a vicious cycle if you expect perfect all the time. But like you said, if you expect excellence to be achieved every time, or like your best effort, your best intentions to it, like you will become better because like there's already like processes in place.
You were saying it's like achieving excellence, right? And then it's like you what you were describing is expectation management, right? In both directions. And that's essential when you start building a relationship with a coach, with a team, what have you, so that everybody understands like what are our expectations here? Do we want to win the championship, for instance, at bird's eye view? Do we want to win the championship, or do we want to just compete, have a good time, right? And that level of expectation then dictates our actions for reaching that expectation, right? And you can break that down to every level. But what I also think is important when you say, hey, it's like I expect excellence. It's like, well, coach, what does excellence mean to you, right? So defining those terms is very, very critical. Where what does excellence look like? And excellence can mean a whole lot of different things based on your upbringing, based on your experience with coaches, based on your experience as an athlete. Has your highest level of play been high school or college or NFL? And what is the level of excellence that was communicated to you, right? So that can vary between organizations, between teams, whatever. But what really matters in that context of maybe you and your niece and nephews is that's right, niece and nephews, right?
Yeah,
That's what you
niece
said.
and nephew.
It's like, hey, let's establish our standard of excellence here between us, right? In this family context or in the coach athlete context at ETSU, what I tried to establish in cooperation with the former weight room supervisor is what we call the code of excellence. That we said, hey, these are 10 items that we say if you exemplify this, you are on a great way or on a great path to pursue the kind of excellence that we say are excellent. Again, it always depends, right? It always depends on the context. It's your organization. If your organization says this is excellence, define excellence, and then one by one, teach. How can I achieve this point? How can I achieve this point? What are the courses of action I need to take to reach this level of excellence for us, right? And that's, again, identity. That's the identity that eventually an organization shows to the outside world, and that maybe over time creates a certain pride in that level of excellence. That creates culture, winning culture, et cetera, right? So like you can spin it as far as you want. But that's really what we've tried to establish is a code of excellence, where this is our set of standards. University of Washington, where you were, they have their own set of standards. Like every weight room in the nation has their own set of standards, right? You see it on the walls everywhere. So as long as people are on the same page, from everyone in the coaching staff to everyone on the team to everyone in the front and back office, what have you, if everyone's on the same board, on the same page with these are our standards, and we do our absolute best to live these things every day, inside the facilities, outside of the facilities, out in the community, then we have a chance to be excellent, and we can be recognized as excellent, right? That's my perspective.
No, I agree. I think something interesting that you said as well was, and I kind of conclude this, and it's something that Coach Mark did a great job of in his internship, is giving yourself something that's just outside your comfort zone. So you can strive for, and you can really grate your teeth and chase after. And it is that thing of just chasing things that are just outside your comfort zone. Because it's okay to feel uncertain sometimes. You don't have to be comfortable all the time. Again, when I started this podcast, my fiance was like, "Are you sure that this is something that you want to do?" And I was like, "She's very supportive. She is." But it is a big risk when you put yourself out there. It's can you keep going through? Can you be consistent? Can you do all these things when you are busy? But it's so many great opportunities have come from this. Some that are very outside my comfort zone, but I push for it anyways, because it's I love that feeling of "Oof, I don't know if I'm going to pull this one out of the hat." But then it happens, and you're like, "Fuck yeah, let's go." Yep,
absolutely. Yeah, that part is just got me thinking too about. And I did my internship at South Carolina, or an internship at South Carolina last year, South Carolina football, under Luke Day and Chip Morton. Before I even did the internship, I heard a couple of their talks at Sornex Summer Strong, and also the opening press conference from Coach Day when he took over the football team as a strength coach. And he mentioned something about struggle being essential to making life experience great. And that stuck with me. And I put that even in my doctoral dissertation, in the dedication or in the acknowledgments. It's it is essential to struggle, because even right now, even in our field, we are trying to come up with technologies and ways to make life easier, right? And we're actually in the weight room is a place of discomfort. It is a place of harshness, right? The steel is non-compliant unless you control it, right? You have to embrace that discomfort, to the discomfort and uncertainty sometimes, right? In the weight room, can I do this, right? Have the courage to do it. And that in and of itself is pretty much the definition of struggle, right? You can struggle in the weight room, you can struggle elsewhere, you can struggle building up a podcast, you can struggle. And then that exposure to that is actually what helps you grow, right? That exposure to the weights helps you grow in muscle or in strength, right? The exposure to the discomfort of trying to build something meaningful with a podcast is whoa, do I have the courage to do this? Right? Can I be consistent, etc.? And all of a sudden you become, you grow as a professional. You grow in character. You grow in your communication skills and your time management and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden you come out at the other end better. So I think that is only possible when you choose to take things on that are, like you said, just outside of your comfort zone. Don't make them impossible.
No. Yeah, that's key.
Make them somewhat scary, but don't make him impossible. And that also comes.
I think one of the great points about that is, if you think about it, we are an industry, we'll just speak about sport in general, where we're fighting and actively advising people to fight against gravity. But not just that, but push even heavier than you are against said gravity. And it's a thing of in very basic terms, that's fucking stupid. That is silly. But it creates these great outcomes. Again, I like reading a lot, and it's one of the best books that I read. And they kind of I always see, and this is again another Coach Markism, it's read wide and read outside of your industry and see how it can apply to your industry. So I've obviously read some books on communication and how to have a conversation. Again, that sounds silly. Like everyone knows how to communicate, conversate,
No,
but
they
like
don't.
not really, not really. And it's being lost because we're on our damn phones all the time. Like this art of communicating is being lost. But I read this book, and it was saying like be comfortable being silent. So it's like if you're having a conversation and someone's asking you a question, like no one says that you have to like there's no laws saying that you have to reply immediately, right?
Yes.
Like you can't just, it's uncomfortable, very uncomfortable to just like get asked a question and just sit there in silence, right? But it's like you actually allow yourself to have a think and to formulate this response that's tailored to their question. And like as simple as that sounds, it's like it was for me. It was like I was like, yeah, like why are we so like interested in just speaking as fast as we can straight after the question? And it comes from that thing of like I want to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. So let me just reply so like the person knows that I know what I'm talking about. But it's like you can also just sit in silence, accept it, and then talk, then get your point across, because it'll be more meaningful then.
100%. It makes me think reacting versus responding. You know, where I've read that over time too, where there's a difference between that, and some people don't know that difference, where that reacting is a more emotionally charged action, right? And responding is a more rational, reserved, composed course of action, if you will. And giving your time to think, you can order your thoughts or put your thoughts in order, and then, like you said, provide a more meaningful response. And I think that is something that can be lost. And I don't think it's just uncomfortable for you pausing. It's also uncomfortable for the person across from you because they're expecting a quick response instead of a well thought out response. You know, and that too is like if we apply this to coaching, you can think about it this way: when an when an athlete asks you something, either you know it or you don't know it, right? The last thing you want to do is lie to an athlete and just pull something out of your ass. You know, it's more so it's like, hey, if you know the answer, great. Think about an appropriate response to the athlete in that moment. Can you answer it? Is it in the middle of the session? Does it take too much time away from the session? Don't answer it. Tell them, say, hey, let's talk about it after the session, right? If you don't have an answer yet, right, you should always have answers for your athletes, right, in the context and field that you're in. But if you don't have an answer for that particular question of the athlete, also have the courage as a coach to say, let's talk about it after. I'm going to find the answer for you, and we'll chat about it later. You know, instead of, like you were saying, having the desire to sound or, you know, make people think that you know what you're talking about. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging it's like, hey, I don't know everything. You know, I'm getting a freaking PhD right now, and I'm so far from saying I know a lot. You know, where people with, you know, with much less education and experience would say it's like, oh, I know the world. I know everything, you know. So that, I think, is a great lesson from education, whether that's formal education in school or self-education like you are doing with picking up books that are unrelated to our field or maybe adjacent to our field, right? That could inform our practices as professionals.
I agree, and I've said this a couple times, and like I do truly mean it. Like the more I do this podcast, like the less I feel like I actually know, because like there's so many like different opinions, different things. Like you can always learn from something. There's I think I told you this, but there's a great saying in Portuguese that translates to you can learn something from everyone, even a dumb person. You can learn not to be them. So it's like it's this idea that, like, again, we spoke about lineages before, but it's like from those lineages you then have your own experiences, that you have athletes, you do workshops, you do clinics, you learn a bunch of stuff, and then you apply it. Then you apply it, then you come up with this like new formula of yours. And it's like at this episode here, I think it's like 116. Like that's a lot of hours that I've recorded.
Yeah.
So like I've had 100 and like more than 100 plus hours of talking to people who are specialists in their area, and like I'm just learning from them all the time. And it's this thing of like, it's that pursuit of more. And like I mentioned to you this in Germany, but like once I learn something new, I have to experiment with it. So I'll go to the weight room and use myself as a guinea pig. And then from there, it's like, is this useful? Is this not? And then just keep building from it. And it's, yeah, the more I do these episodes, the less I feel like I actually know.
Yeah, but I think that is very humbling. It keeps you humble, and that is, I think, a great strength of someone educated, intellectual, if you will, wise, mature, right? Because if you're too quick to say, or too quick to certainty, let's say, it's like this is the absolute truth, right? And I've learned this just from my recent years doing research and reading a lot. It's like you can never say with 100% certainty, especially in our field, because like you said, you have 115, 116 episodes and a lot of differing opinions on different training methodologies, because that training methodology has worked for them, that one has worked for them, but if they tried the other one with their respective team, it might not work for them, So I think having an open mind is very, very important, especially in your chair, with you always kind of being the neutral medium, if you will. Like you listen, you absorb, you go experiment yourself, and you find, oh, it works for me or it doesn't work for me. And then you eventually see nothing works for everybody, And yeah, I mean, just me having dove into the research, research and science always tries to generalize things, and that's basically the essence of it. And having been in it for a few years now and spending time in the literature, obviously much less than a Doc Stone has and those guys, but I'm realizing that there is so much that we don't know as a whole, not just as individuals, but that we don't know as a whole, and that we always need to consider the individual. Brian Mann said that before, where it's like every person is an n equals one. Coming from that scientific side of things, it's like it's an n equals one. So everybody's pretty much a case study, which is something that scientific research doesn't really want to hear, because we're trying to generalize, right? We want to see, it's like, okay, what works generally, what works qualitatively, what can we apply? It's like, hey, this approach, this method works, right? It's like, well, if I try this in this context with these people, it might not, and I'm seeing this at the same university, dealing with a male team and with a female team in the same sport, and they're responding totally different, for one, to a training program, to an exercise, even to a singular exercise, or even to my own personal coaching style and my personality. Same environment, but still very different environment. And as a coach, like the more the more you hear from different people, oh, now my toolbox grows. Or as Chip Morton said last year, the bigger my paint palette becomes as an artist, as a coach, right? So the more colors I can use to find that solution for that team or that athlete that I'm dealing with within the team.
So I think this is a really good point. Again, you're in both sides, where you are doing the research and you are doing the coaching, the practical application of it. And it's this thing where, I mean, you again, like I've just mentioned, you'll know yourself, but the research is so far behind what we're doing in the field. That's kind of like what, and again, I understand that the processes is what takes the longest, the peer reviewed, the making sure that you pass your Viva and all that stuff, and it's this thing of like, if we only do one paper on it, do we really have enough pieces of the puzzle to be like, yes, this works?
No.
I had Doc on a couple days ago, and even he was like, I mean, even with my research, like, we can only assume that it still it works because I've done so many of the same types of trials and proven time and time again that it can be effective. But even then, he's not giving us like definites. He's giving us cans, maybes, and it's like, it's not. Yes, exactly. And it's again, when I did my bachelor's dissertation, I think it was before that. one of my lecturers sat me down and was like, you can't say for definite it works. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, it's just theories. Like, a theory is like hypothetical. Like, yes, it may work, yes, it might not work. So when you're talking about it in literature, you can't say it definitely works. Do this. Because, like, it might not.
Yeah, exactly. And I think then you take that finding piece of research, my dissertation, your dissertation, you have to apply critical thinking to it, and that is not a skill that you have at 20 years old, at 22, even at 24 sometimes, or even later than that in your 20s, like some people
or have
never
the confidence to do it.
And the confidence, exactly, that too is uncomfortable, right? To critically think about not just what you're reading or what you're seeing, what you're observing, but also yourself. Critically think about yourself, your program. Why are you doing what you're doing, and what are you basing it off of, right? And so that takes courage too. And I think that people, especially coaches, sometimes don't do that. They don't critically think about that. And we've talked about lineage earlier. They sometimes just think, okay, this is the way I was brought up in this field. This is the way, this is the truth, right? Whereas it might be for this particular group that they were dealing with back then, but it might not work this time. Because we're, like you were saying earlier too, we're in a different generation, right? With not us as coaches having evolving mindsets and creativity and what have you, but also athletes. We look at their thought processes, their entitlement at times, their
social media usage, because that's
social media usage. I mean, it's a lot of it, right? I mean, you stand in front of athletes and they, it's like, hey, well, this fitness influencer did this exercise. Can we do this? So why do you think they did that? Now you have to critically think about some TikTok or whatever video and you have to explain to your athletes why you are not doing this and why this might not be appropriate for the context that they're in. But that too, it also makes you a better professional while critically thinking about that. It's like, well, maybe there's something to this fitness influencer doing this. It's like, but you don't want to give them credit for it. Or, so it's like, why didn't I come up with this? And so, yeah.
So I think you'll appreciate this story.
Yeah.
Again, I've just spoken about learning outside of the industry and bringing it into the industry.
Mm-hmm.
There was a while I got really into coding. So like I'd make like little websites and whatnot. It was just fun, something different. I was in a job that I kind of hated my life. So I was like, what else can I do? Yeah. So it got me to pick up coding, and that kind of took me over to university and all that. But they've got this theory where it's the rubber duck theory. And in programming, so I have a little rubber duck in all my desks. And the theory goes, if you have a problem or an issue with your code, you get this rubber duck out and you explain the code to the duck the whole way. Like line by line, you explain it, justify why it's there, is it correct or right, and it kind of brings you to come up with the solution yourself, because like you're having to explain it. Then you're more likely to identify the issue, you're more likely to identify the problem, solve it, boom, you're done. But like, so then I was thinking like, okay, how can this apply to coaching? And it's like, if I'm writing out a program, okay, and this athlete is responding really well to this stimulus, this athlete isn't, okay, then like, what are they doing different to the other? Is it physical? Like, are they doing something physically different to each other? Is it more like their body just isn't accepting it? Like, how can we work around that? Is there a different way I can introduce the same stress but apply it differently? So say if we're working on quad dominant strength, do I get them on a back squat? Do I get them on a front squat? Tall box step up? Like, that pattern's the same, but like, how do I introduce this stress? Is it the stress itself that's not helping them create this adaptation? So then by going through this line by line, I'm like, okay, they're not responding to this way, let me try this. So I make those changes in the program. Or if I'm as much as I love sports science and strength and conditioning, a lot of people get paralyzed by the analysis. Like, there's so much data you can get, like people don't know what to do with it. So like, I've now, from speaking with people, like just two things: pick up two measurements, get really good at them, measure that, and then like phase specific, like, okay, I'm in preseason, what are my specifics compared to my on season? do the metrics change? Then like it's this whole process of like having to explain and justify why you're doing something to this rubber duck.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because I like just a couple weeks ago we had an in-service. So we do these in-services every now and again where we come together as a staff, and in that case it was me kind of being supposed to talk about pulling derivatives. That could be anything like, clean pulls and what have you, upper body rowing, pull-ups, et cetera, right? And without going too far off the map here, one thing I noted to the coaches in the room is like, you need to, just like I said earlier, you need to have a rationale, you need to have an answer as to why you're doing a certain thing in the program, right? There's, based on the literature, based on the evidence, there are exercises that are likely more appropriate to create a certain stimulus or stress, like you said, to create a favorable chronic adaptation if we keep doing that exercise in a progressive overload with some variation, with all the certain different training principles applied, right? But what if you deal with someone that can't do that exercise, like you said? Why do you choose the next exercise, right? Have a reason for it. And what has worked really well for me, getting this women's soccer team to buy into weight training, some of them actually love it. Some of them love to lift. Some of them they're a little harder to convince, right? So what I do a lot is just educating them. Why we squat, right? Why we bench press as soccer players, right? And then creating that rationale, it's like creating that understanding in their heads, leads to buy-in, or has led to buy-in in my case, right? Not leads to, because it might not. It has led to more buy-in from their end, and since they are natural competitors, now they want to become better at it, right? They want to become better at the bench press, because beforehand they didn't know why they bench pressed as a soccer player. Why do we need it, right? And then you explain to them a certain rationale. It's like, hey, you want shoulder health. You have physical contact on the pitch. You want to make sure that the whole shoulder girdle is strong, right? And it's not just bench press. You can do overhead press and all the different things, but have a rationale for why you do what you do, like you were saying, explaining with the code, and find the one that works the best. Because that's another thing that my first strength coach said to me, is the best program is the one that works the best. It's not the program that is best because of the literature. It's not the best program because it's super meticulously planned and you have every principle accounted for, but it's more so, does it work in the context that I'm in right now? For example, like the girls have played 2 games a week. That's just how collegiate soccer works. Like they play 2 games a week. Right now we've been lifting once a week. Would I like to lift more? Sure. There's only so much we can do based on their class schedule, based on travel schedules, based on the predispositions of the head coach towards lifting weights, based on
NCAA.
NCAA regulations, right? Countable hours. And also, how do the girls respond to lifting? Can they tolerate soreness? Or are they more sensitive to that stimulus? Like, hey, if I'm sore, I don't feel ready to play. Whereas football players, for instance, it's like, yeah, I'm sore. That's fine. I'm still going to perform. I'm still going to get after it. And again, even within the same team, you have girls that are more sensitive and some girls that are less sensitive. So it like the whole it depends thing just comes up over and over and over again, and you have to find good reasons for why you do what you do, and for the adjustments that you take and things that you don't do. Why do you not do a certain thing? I also have an answer for that.
I think, again, I'm going to presume by the timelines, we're pretty much the same age. So the way that we grew up as well is like we had to justify our programs. Like, how many times have you had your programs absolutely picked apart? A lot, right?
Yeah, but honestly, I think I've picked my own programs apart more than anything.
But that's what I'm getting onto.
By analysis, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm getting onto, and it's like by being in that environment, you then start taking that into your own hands. Like, so again, the rubber duck, or just physically doing it yourself. Like, you look through your programs. Like, okay, I've done this recently, and I had to look at my programs when I was like 14, 15, 16. Like, they were dog shit, like absolute dog shit. But that's where I started. Right?
Yeah.
but now I can identify like
Imagine
where
you
I.
would
Sorry,
imagine you would look at them right now. It's like, man, I was
I was
pretty
onto
good back then.
something.
You're like, sheesh, man. Like, if that's the case, you probably have not grown. You know?
Although I will say this, when I was in the development squads for rugby, we had a speed development coach.
Hmm.
Now, the stuff that he was doing is like what we're talking about, like doing now. So, like, I look at his programs, I'm like, fuck, like he was onto something.
Hmm.
So that was fascinating for me to revisit. But like going back to it, it's like if I'm at this point where like in my programs, if I know one of my athletes likes to talk shit on pitch, I have to count for that in my programs in his conditioning. Like I
Hmm.
want him to be conditioning to play the whole game and a half, and then still be able to talk shit for that game and a half. Like
Hmm.
it's like having these little processes where you're like, okay, I know he's this kind of player. I need him to be built to do that kind of performance.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
When it comes to your programming, like what are some things that you really look to develop and really look to push on for your teams?
Well, it depends. Again, I have to say that because I didn't start working with the women's soccer team, for instance, until July of this year. It's when they reported back. I was kind of thrust into that situation because of internal things. And so I was like, okay, brand new team. They're about to start their preseason in 10 days. I was not in charge of their development over the summer or even the previous spring. So I basically start from scratch. And, over time, yes, I was always like, let's perform better. Let's get them strong. Like we always hear talk about squat, strength, 2 times body weight and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, I'd love for them to be stupid strong, like because the stronger they are, the better their interaction with the ground. You talked about gravity, but the more important thing is that their sport is not lifting weights. Their
Hmm.
sport is not squatting the bar or cleaning the bar or what have you, right? Their sport is playing soccer. And I need to make sure that these women are available for practice. They are available for games. So the first thing I need to find out is like what prevents availability, and that's injury, right? That's illnesses, and so how can I nip it in the bud pretty much with my work as a strength and conditioning coach, and that's addressing those risk factors. Yeah, I'd like to work on performance more than anything, but the middle of the season or the beginning of the season when you're about to do two-a-days and 2 games a week, it's not the time to build stupid strength. It's making sure that people are healthy and are available and that they feel good, feel fresh, feel recovered. So I need to kind of shift my focus. I had to shift my focus at that time. So certain things, I mean, things you asked, what are some things that are very important for me in building a program? It's making sure that they're available. But if I want to get really specific with it, I want to make sure they, have a lot of multi-joint work in there. Exercises that give me the most bang for my buck. I squat, I
Mm.
pull, I press, and I have an upper body pull in there in every session. And right now it's just one session a week. So I need to make sure that all muscle groups are used in a sense that I create a stimulus in some sense, and that certain capacities, motor abilities are maintained, and that's rate of force development. So I try to design the program in a progressive fashion over the course of the season too, which I'm not going to get too much into the nitty gritty of that, but I always have a squat pattern, I have a hinge pattern, I have a press pattern, I have a pull pattern in there. I have some form of rotation, torso rotation, so anything for the midsection or anti-rotation in there. And that's pretty much it because I only have them for 1 hour a week in the weight room, so I try to maximize that time. Anything else, I try to incorporate in my warm-ups, whether it's minimal, like microdosing, like people like to say now, microdosing certain stimuli that I don't need the weight room for. I can do that on the pitch in the warm-ups, but yeah, I'm basically sticking to the fundamental movement
Mm.
patterns, try to load them appropriately and try to progress them over time, but always keeping in mind I only have them 1 day a week. And if I overdo it, they're going to have that cumulative fatigue from that lifting session and carry that into training and so on and so forth. So
I think as well what is important to take away from that is like, again, in the ideal program, you have 3 days where you can do whole body, upper push, upper pull, lower body, hinge, knee dominant. Like, have your big movements in there, but like when you are restricted to 1 day, 1 hour, like you have to optimize and think outside the box as much as possible to still be able to protect them as much as possible.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, again, we come here from a block periodized approach where there's a more better way to program design, right? As per what we should be doing with our teams here. But like you said, that is not always possible. 1 day a week, it's like everybody agrees like you need to get a full body approach in there. If you have a running heavy sport like soccer, you want to make sure that the lower body's not being too taxed, especially if you have a training session later that day on the pitch. And then obviously, from that load management side of things, you want to make sure that practice later in the day does not conflict with the stimulus that you're providing in the weight room, from a neuromuscular, but also from a metabolic side of thing. And that is obviously always a conversation you need to have with the head coach and the assistant coaches in my case. But that works really well, and I
think as well as like when we look at phases, it's like what's happening with the development side, but like also the maintenance side in season. Like I can't remember, I was in a coach forum and we were talking about a sport where there's like multiple games a week, but like they still need some type of hinge, some type of knee dominant movement. Obviously that may come with higher chances of DOMs, which will mean that they're playing sore. So I think that the coach was talking about like, can we still introduce the stress to get the adaptations we need or the maintenance we need, but not make them sore? So instead of like an RDL, can we get them like to do it on a platform or a box where they're a little bit higher, there's less range involved in it, they're still somewhat getting the same stress, but now they don't have DOMs. Like, how can we play with this? I think it kind of goes back to the conversation we spoke about before, but it's like, what are different exercises that get the same stress, but affect the body differently?
Yeah. So for me, that's a great example here because, like I said, I took the team over, the women's soccer team, took them over right after their summer. And I know from conversations with them, with the head coach, is that a lot of them, and looking at our lifting compliance too, like we use Bridge Athletic, and we can see if they adhere to the program that was prescribed to them over the summer. It wasn't from me, but based on lack of buy-in to the previous coach and his program, they did not comply too much with that program. So I know that there's not a lot of stimulus, especially knee dominant, hamstring focused exercises. So what do? If I introduce it right now in the middle of preseason, they're going to be sore, not just sore, but that new stimulus will put too much stress on the hamstring, which then if they actually start getting after it in practice might lead to soft tissue injury. So I was very, very careful leading up to it. And what I did was, instead of doing an RDL or SLDL or, even Nordics, which are obviously super aggressive in that instance, I actually did a hip thrust with a little bit of a more hamstring emphasis, with a greater hamstring emphasis, where the girls would have their back on the bench, use the barbell in their lap, right? But instead of having the heels close to your butt, slide the heel out a little bit further. And I had them do that with just the barbell and even without the barbell, just to feel the difference between having the heels close and then having the heels further out. And then they realize, it's like, oh yeah, I feel more of a hamstring stimulus when my heels go out. And obviously, like, I want to pull the toes up. I want to drive through the heels on every repetition. And, that also leads to sometimes not being able to fully extend the hips in that top position, which is fine. I just want to create that tension, the mechanical tension in the hamstring. So I just move the heels out a little bit. They can keep the whole tension. They never sit their butt down in the whole exercise. And what I did was I have them do 3 reps, 1, 2, 3, hold the top position for a second, 1, 2, hold the top position for a second, 1 rep, hold the top position for a second. Was, there was a little bit of a dynamic effort, there was a little bit of an isometric effort in there, or contraction, right? And that ultimately, I was always checking in the next day. It's like, hey, how are you feeling today? It's like, oh, that feels fine. And that was also because I was very, very conservative with loading them. It's like, hey, let's just do the barbell and maybe 5 or 10 pounds each side. And then the next day they were fine. But we still provided a stimulus to the hamstrings, right? It's more than not having done it. And then the next week they were familiar with the stimulus, more familiar, so I added a little bit more load to it, even with just 1 session a week, right? And on a different note, not knee dominant exercises, but I've had them do, and this is a staple for me because you asked about staples before, is pull-ups. I want my women to be able to do pull-ups. Every human should be able to do pull-ups. So I want them every week, since I took them over, we've been working on pull-ups. And even with 1 session a week, we've seen improvements in pull-ups, whether they've been able to do their first one or their 6th or their 8th one, right? But there have been improvements with just 1 session a week, which shows me we can create adaptation, strength adaptation, power adaptation with just 1 session a week. Is that congruent with the literature? Yes, maybe no, right? So it depends again. So I need to figure out what works for them, implement it, and then run with it or make adjustments down the road. And that hamstring exercise has worked really well. But again, over time, I'm like, this is not going to be effective for after 4 weeks or something. So I eventually made or intensified the hamstring stimulus a little bit more. And now, we're pulling trap bars essentially from blocks. So I have a very heavy stimulus, but I'm pulling from blocks, limited range of motion, right, constraint based, but they're able to provide a high neuromuscular stimulus with very low volume. So I'm getting a lot of bang from my buck in that short period of time. They have a hinge, they have basically a squat. I'm not too worried about full range of motion in that time right now. I'm getting that elsewhere. So that's where I'm doing the it's almost an at knee, below knee, depending on height, pull that is pretty heavy. And then I contrast that with overspeed jumps, band assisted jumps, for instance, right? And yeah, I always provide a rationale why we do what we do. I progress the training program even with 1 a week session and try to teach them things along the way and provide a certain stimulus. So
yeah, the thing that's fascinating there is you're talking about, like, obviously being a block periodization heavy program, but even then, like, you can still apply like French contrast type in there, some more like strength based like implementations of it, principles of it. And I think that's what a lot of the great coaches that I've had on is like, and we kind of touched on it before, it's like many roads lead to Rome, but like there's nothing wrong with having the map for other directions.
that's the thing. The whole, so you were mentioning periodized approach. I think there is a very reasonable and rational place for contrast complexes and whatever. It's merely a progression in the periodized plan, right? It's a progression from, and Doc talks about it in class. We talked about complexes as part of a block periodized program. But it always comes down to, why am I doing it? To who am I applying this? And what's the outcome of this? Not just exercise, not just the one-time occurrence of a contrast complex, but how am I progressing it over a 4-week block or a concentrated load microcycle, like summated microcycle. How or why am I doing this? And then apply it properly, right? Like then come up with the exercises that fill it, and then as you have that set, take it to the athletes, run it, and then see, this works great for 2/3 of the team, but this 1/3 of the team, they can't do it. Okay, let me change it up a little bit so that the stimulus is similar to what the other guys are doing, and at the end of the day, I'm still getting the job done. I'm still moving the needle in the right direction, right? And then another phase in training, another stage in training, we can make more changes. We go back to something else. Hey man, really quick, man. I'm seeing the time, and okay. I want to keep talking for many more hours, but I've got soccer practice coming up here soon. I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah,
maybe we can continue the conversation in a part 2 or something. I don't know.
Yeah, of course. Again, I'm the way that things are going, again, I've always done this, but like I can have whoever I want whenever I want.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to continue again. But no, it is important to say, like, just because one thing has been done a lot doesn't necessarily mean it's right all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like explaining and finding the rationale for yourself as well. Like, we've spoke throughout this episode where, again, we kind of need to take ownership and have the confidence to do things our way as well. Like, as long as the rationale is there, like, you know, you can do with it. Like, again, I've been doing this since I was 14. So, like, when I was programming for my assessments at university, I knew I had some wiggle room in there to fuck around a little bit. So, like, in one of my essays or exams, was like we had to make a 12-week program for a randomly selected athlete. But no matter what the scenario was, I always had bicep curls in there. And, like, it's silly, and it's just something I was like, I could fucking get away with this. But, like, in my justification, I was like, well, I need buy-in from the athlete. He's 17 years old. Like, I need that buy-in. He's going to get big muscles. He's going to be like, fuck yeah, money gets me strong. I'm going to go across there. I've got bigger biceps now. But then, like, I would also say as well, as like an elbow health standpoint, great. I can also get some elbow health in there for them. And it's like, the thing I have an issue with is like people who program, but they're just like throwing shit at walls and hoping it sticks.
Yep.
Right? Because like
that's not what it is, man.
Yeah.
And
so
that's the thing. We talked about it earlier. It's evidence-based practice, right? Evidence is not just, you know, like the literature or whatever, but it's also like, hey, what actually works? Like, what are we trying to do here? You know, what works for the athlete? What is anecdotal evidence? What is your experience that has worked? Is it the buy-in that leads to a more intentional training session or training program or 12-week phase of training? And what do I need to do instead of just like, oh man, this exercise looks cool on Instagram. It's like, I'm going to throw that in there. But it's like, you don't actually know what it does. Mm-hmm. What does it do at the mechanical, at the metabolic level with a different set rep configuration at a certain intensity, right? Like, don't just throw that shit in there. Like, have a reason for it. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a reason, don't put it in there. Put something else in there or leave it out. But yeah, sorry, I just
100%.
had to.
Again, no, I agree. I love it when you go off. Yeah, it's 100% right. It's like, it's having that thing of like, everything and anything can help, but it also can't.
Yeah.
It does depend massively on what you're wanting to achieve. Again, I'm aware that you have practice coming up soon. I really appreciate you for coming on, Alex. If I know you're kind of ghost mode right now, so you don't have any social media, but if people want to reach out to you, if you can just point them in the right direction to reach out to you.
Yeah, I'll come back on social media and when all my manuscript or when my manuscript is turned into the grad school and all that, which shouldn't be too much longer. But I'm back on LinkedIn actually. So Alexander Borgs, that's my full name. You can find me on LinkedIn, Alexander Borgs, and you have my school email address. If you want to share that with people, I'm available there. And soon I'll be back on Instagram as well. But maybe we can catch up in another episode, and by that time I'll be back on.
Just 1 second, just so people can see your LinkedIn. Is this the right one?
That's it.
Cool.
That's me.
I appreciate you so much for coming on.
Appreciate you.
We'll speak soon.
I can't wait for it.
There's some exciting things coming up as well with Meg and Mike, with you as well. So keep an eye on that.
All right.
Peace.